Council of Governors meeting, formal meeting. The agenda you have in the papers, so I'll just start off as normal. Welcome introductions. Well, welcome to new governors. Some of the governors, of course, are ones that we remember from their previous lives, like Graham. So welcome, Graham. But we have some new governors. I don't know how many are on the call, but welcome to you all anyway. Apologies for absence, Julie.
Yeah, got apologies from Deborah Alcock-Tyler, Paul Myers-Coe, Tina Doyle, Natasha Bertholier and Elaine Williams.
Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Any declarations to declare? No. 4.1 is minutes of the last meeting. Any corrections, please? Okay, I don't think there are any matters arising, but has anyone picked anything up? Okay. Election results.
Martin, got my hand up.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Apologies, Graham.
I wasn't at the meeting, so therefore I have no comments to make on the accuracy of the minutes. I had a couple of comments to make, though, on the contents of the minutes, or perhaps questions. The first one, in the agenda for this meeting, we've got annual declarations of interest, which is fine because there's then a list of the annual declarations from everybody. Understood. But in the minutes of the previous meeting, it refers to annual declarations of interest. Now, I reckon that should just be declaration of interest because I don't see that it was annual at that meeting. So that's my first comment. My other one, if you'll bear with me, because I highlighted these, now I've got to scroll down to find out what I've highlighted. Yes, you had an item at 12, confidential issue, and to exclude press and public. But then there is no minute, even a bland, all-encompassing minute of what was discussed. Now, normally I reckon, and certainly in agendas and minutes I've seen of all sorts of meetings, even if you discuss a confidential issue in some detail, there is nevertheless in the minutes of the meeting a reference to what was, might be a general title almost, but so that anybody can even recall later what it was without having to go back to the agenda.
Yeah.
The confidential agenda that you discussed. That was my second comment.
Oh, thank you, Graham. Julia, are you able to help?
Yeah, I'm just trying to scroll down. Sorry, I was on leave when the papers were. We should have on this agenda, that's apologies for that, we should have included actually the private minutes, because although we excluded the press and public for the discussion, there was nothing in the private minutes which was actually confidential, so they should have been included. So I apologise for that, and Linda can correct the minutes in terms of making it clear that it was just the declarations rather than the annual declarations. I can send round the minutes of the private meeting so that governors have got that. I'm sorry, yeah, apologies for that.
I would say that in the public minutes there should, in my personal view, there should be a reference to what was discussed in as I say, in very general overview terms, without going into detail, just to make it clear to anyone from the public reading the minutes that there was a discussion about something. A personnel issue was discussed, or whatever it might have been,
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks so much, Graham. John.
Very quickly, I would support Graham in his this is the topic, and secondly would suggest that we might be able to have a line. If you'd like details, please approach the trust secretary, which applies only to the governors, so not a member of the general public, but for governors only. So just a thought to be considered.
Yeah, I think what Julie's saying, she's going to send round the confidential bits to governors anyway, so you'll see all that. It should have been there, but it was an error. Is that right, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. Because although we took the discussion was taken in private, when I actually wrote the minutes, there wasn't anything in the minutes which I thought should be, we could disclose we could put those that bit of those minutes in the public domain.
Okay, is that all right? Fine, let's move on then to election results. Julie.
Yeah, this is just to note that we had uncontested elections and the results are there. And we currently have elections running at the moment for our two staff governors and in Reading and Slough.
Okay, and sorry, Julie, go on the 3.1b, the governor declarations. I think Sarah Croxford's entry has got confused. It's got it's a public West Berkshire, whether she's Wham, and I think her name is Sarah, not Sahar. So just a couple of typos, I think there.
Yeah, we'll get that corrected.
Thank you. Sorry, right. See if we can get on. So that's the congratulations then to all of those who are new governors. And I think perhaps if you may, then we'll pass on to the patient experience quarterly report and welcome Heidi Ilsley, Deputy Director of Nursing. Are you there, Heidi?
I am. Good morning, everyone. Hoping everyone's taken the report and had the opportunity to read it. So happy to take any questions. The main area I wanted to note this morning was the improvement we're seeing in the patient feedback. So we've been using I Want Great Care since December 21 now, and month on month, quarter on quarter, we are starting to see some richer feedback and definitely some improvements. So I just wanted to note that really, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Any questions for Heidi? Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Good morning. As I, by the way, on page 28, I noticed that the mental health inpatients, friends and family score has gone back 73%, which is good news. But the point I wanted to make was on page 39, the compliments in the last quarter were about 500 lower than they normally are. And there was no mention of talking therapies in the table of the top 10. So I'm just wondering whether it is omitted for some reason, or whether that service is less appreciated than it has been.
No, Guy, I think you've picked something up there, because talking therapies, as you know, always gets a lot of compliments and a lot of feedback. So I will just take that back and double check, because they are normally one of our highest contributors in compliments.
Thank you.
Okay. Tom.
Yes, several points. So if you bear with me, start with the bar charts, score by question. The bar charts in this section.
Could you just say the page numbers, Tom, just so it's easy?
Well, let's start with page 2 of this report, page 16 of the whole agenda.
16, yeah.
So there's a bar chart at the top, and you'll see there's 2 grey areas, and I've always assumed they mean no response. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, I'm nodding. Yeah, that's where there's there's no.
Well,
yeah.
Well, they very often are facilities and ease, and I'm wondering if these are questions which are not well understood by the people, answering this questionnaire.
Yeah. I mean, it could be to do with, perhaps the estates and facilities questions aren't relevant to them, or that kind of thing. So again, I can go back and I can double check for you.
It happens quite frequently. If you look at them, some more graphs, you'll find this.
And it generally is estates and facilities.
Yeah. So now the next thing, I'll have to do a search, I'm afraid, if you want a page number. A minute. Some points in the small print about the individual complaints, which I thought were of wider interest. One thing was, it said that there was and this is on page 41, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh entry down, and it says there's a pilot carers clinic at Prospect Park, I think, which I thought was of wider interest than just to be hidden away here.
Okay, so you want that noted. I mean, we do quite a lot of publicity around the carers groups and that. So, but absolutely, if you think that's important, that's something we can look at putting in the body of the report.
Well, I thought it was interesting for governors, and I think we'd probably like to hear how it went when the pilot comes to the end of the pilot. That's all. I think it really is of interest, you know.
Yeah, no problem at all.
So it's in the response part of the query. And there's one more which I will find now, and that is on page 43, the fourth issue down. And there's a particular issue here. I don't know, it's some clinical which I don't understand, but it said that the district nurses are now issued with ketone monitors. And I wondered if that's Berkshire wide, if there's been a sort of process of doing this right across Berkshire.
Again, I'm not sure because we do things, as you know, different in east and west. So I will have to find out. Certainly it is east wide, but I don't know if it's gone out to the west as well. So I'll find out. I'm sure now. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but with our new directorates, we're managing all of our services across the whole of Berkshire. So generally, if we introduce anything new, we have something called CDG, which is our clinical development group. And if something new is introduced, it is then rolled out. So what I don't know is how far it's been rolled out, but I can certainly find out. But it will be now because we do everything Berkshire wide, unless it's something that's individually commissioned.
Okay, that's reassuring. I just wanted to find out about that. Now, there's one more thing, I'm afraid, and that is the table, the way the appendix to complaints, the table of complaints, page 36. Sorry, struggling with find my cursor. Here we go. If you look at page 36, well, the very first entry shows that complaints have decreased in the last quarter. That's true, but the significant fact here is that they've nearly doubled over the year. And this table really needs to be rethought by somebody that understands statistics and statistical significance, because the change from 18 to 14 is hardly significant, but the change from 32 in 1 year to 53 in the next one is the important fact on that first entry. And I think this, you know, we've moaned about the stats, about statistics for some time, but I think it would be a good idea to take this table and really work out what we want to do with it. And perhaps QA group could do this, sort of get involved, but it's not doing a good job at the moment. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, Graham.
Well, my second question, so I'll deal with that first, is exactly to the point Tom's just made. It's on the table at page 36, and it's the lies, damn lies and statistics comment, because without knowing the percentage of business that these individual rows comprise within the whole of BHFT, a percentage of total means nothing. So, for example, let's say that the numbers for CMHT care pathways, the first row, is you know, that represents 100 patients within the trust, and the second row, CAMS, represents 1,000 patients. Well, if you've got that number of complaints in that number of patients, the fact it's 22% of the total number of complaints is absolutely meaningless. You need to understand what it relates to in terms of patient numbers in order to get some sense of how important that number is, to my view. So I do think I agree with Tom entirely. I think that table needs to be pulled apart, put back together again to be statistically significant.
And
now,
in the main body of the report and the appendices, so we do normally try to put what percentage of like visits, you know, or contacts that actually reflects. So normally in the rest of the report. So I appreciate what you're saying about the table, but I just hope that some of the others in the report does explain that a bit further.
And that's fine. I just, you know, you come to these tables and you go, hang on, I don't really understand what this is trying to tell me, because I need to understand what it represents across the whole of the piece. So that was my second one. My first one was the question about you refer to MPs making I'm not going to say complaints, because it could be comments.
Inquiries.
My recollection from, and this is a while back, and I have to say, cannot remember whether it was BHFT or Royal Berks. I made an inquiry. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was treated as an MP's piece. So my question is, and there isn't any reference to local government inquiries, so councillor inquiries here, whether or not your MPs includes that cohort, because maybe the description could be subtly different if it does, and if it doesn't, do you get inquiries from local government which are not necessarily reflected?
Do you know?
No.
I don't know the. Do you know, Martin? I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
I
Someone's
do.
trying to speak. Who's?
Julian.
Oh, hi, Julian.
Yeah, given I sign them all off,
Yeah.
I should have a. No, Graham, we don't. I can't remember the last time. Obviously, officer to officer, we would, that's not we would just resolve outside of it. But no, have we had a inquiry coming in from a local councillor in the last 5 years directly? No. A lot of the time, I suspect we get queries from officers to officers that have been generated by council members. But at the moment, the MP numbers you're seeing are inquiries from MPs and MPs alone.
Oh, okay. A question asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom, is your hand up again, or is it?
Just wanted to stress that we could ask, really, could we take this table back to QA group? That would be really useful, and have somebody there that can really just discuss the reformatting of it or reorganisation of it.
Yeah. Tom, I don't know, but I'm now guessing, Heidi, but I think this is a standard pack that goes to the board, if I recall. So it might be useful if the QA group, whatever, is put some comments into Heidi, and then Heidi can sort of consider in the wider context what, if there's any presentational changes. Would that be all right? So
Yeah,
at
no
least
problem.
rather than the QA group doing something and then the board might decide want something else, and we end up with Heidi being run ragged. That's good.
You.
No, thank you very much, Heidi. So if there's nothing else on that, thank you very much, Heidi. And we move on to the National NHS Staff Survey results, and welcome Jane, I hope. Are you there, Jane? Oh, sorry, John, did you have a... John Wellen, did you have a point?
Yes.
Sorry,
yes,
I just...
very
Go
quickly. I would find it helpful if the results that we've just had were relative to the total number of patients that had been through the hospital's doors, so that we could get a sense of the relevance. Because if they only have 10 people and 5 of them complain, that's actually far more important than 1,000 people from whom only five complain. So if we can, be good.
That'd be fine. Well, I think Heidi's got those points.
Yes, thank
I'm
you.
sure. Thank you, Heidi. Okay, let's move on to the staff survey results. Jane.
Jane's having connection problems, so Steph
welcome,
is
Steph.
doing the presentation.
No pressure then, Steph.
I did say I'd be here as backup, so yeah, hopefully I'll be able to answer as many questions as Jane has. So again, I'll like Heidi said, take the presentation as read, but really just want to highlight. I mean, the survey results have continued to be incredibly strong against our previous performance, and also against other trusts within our ICSs and within the region. Our response rate went up from 60 to 65% this year, which was a brilliant increase, and really shows that these results are more reflective of the organisation, and we'll continue to try and increase those over next year. Engagement score has remained the top score for trusts of our type for the last 3 years now. So we're doing, I mean, there are so many points where we're doing really well that when I look at these results, I have to look at how far away we are from the top, rather than because we're always above average, at least at the sort of the headline figures. There is still a lot of work to do. There are scores that we're not happy with, that we've identified. A lot of this ties into work where there's already a lot of work going on in those areas, particularly around, this gives us the information that informs the RES, so the Workforce Race Equality Standard, the Workforce Disability Equality Standards, and that ties into the huge body of work that Ash and team have got going on within that. So it's a really good informer. The HR team as well are spending a lot of time looking at the results at a local level with the divisions, and it forms, you know, we really try and make this triangulate with other work. So we're looking at what's happening with retention, what's happening with turnover, what's happening with sickness absence, what's happening with the staff survey, and bring that together as a joint picture across the piece. So there's a lot of work going on within the divisions, which is where we find we then get the increased response rate, because people can see the action that's being taken at a local level. But yeah, I will open to any questions on the paper that was submitted.
Thank you, Steph. It's certainly a very impressive set of results. Guy.
Yeah, hi Steph, thank you.
Hi, Guy.
On page 51, I noticed that the satisfaction score for appraisals is 5.4, which is higher than the national average, but it's still pretty low, really. I'm just wondering what we might be able to do as an organisation to get more benefit from people's appraisals for them.
So I'm just trying to find the.
Steph, can I come in for a second?
Yeah.
If that's all right on that.
Please do.
Yeah. Guy, you're absolutely right. The evidence base around appraisals, led by Michael West, is really conclusive. So you've got to have an appraisal, but actually having an appraisal that's not well structured, not meaningful, not stretching, doesn't have smart objective, actually has no impact at all on the well-being or staff engagement of an employee. You've got to do all of those things, and actually doing all of those things is actually quite complicated. You know, really putting out and planning aligned, stretching, meaningful objectives, and then having a conversation that's evidence-based, looks at people's health and well-being, personal development, and all of those things is a real skill set. And we've got to continue to train up our managers now. During COVID, quite a lot of our essential training for managers was put on hold for very obvious reasons. And we are refreshing that program for managers, and actually getting that right and nailing it is going to be really important. And it will be the thing that will start to differentiate those organizations that continue to progress from those other ones. So that score I see as a critical score guide, where we need to see some improvements. And so above average isn't good enough for us. We want that score to be really good. And if you do, I predict you'll see increases right across the board on some of the other indicators that are meaningful for us.
Thank you both.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Steph, it looks as though you've got off with an easy ride, but I have to say, no, you have to say, just looking at that, I know there are things that we are concerned we want to improve, but overall, this is a really impressive score, and I think we ought to just record our thanks to the executive, because it's this is not easy. It as other trusts find out. Okay, Steph, thanks very much indeed. Item 8 is crisis resolution home treatment team service. Darren Bailey, are you on, Darren?
Martin, Tom's got his hand up.
Can I just
Tom.
come in? So just very briefly, how are we going to come back to the issues where we know that there's improvement required, the various diversity and equality measures and so on? What should we need to record that we want to come back to what's happening and where we're going, sort of thing?
Yeah, of course, the actions for this is through the board. I mean, it's a board
Yes.
responsibility to
Yeah.
make sure this happens, and the executive to do it. So that's where it is, and our reports back from the board and reports when we produce reports like this are available to governors, so you can see the progress.
Thank you.
Is that all right? Yeah, it's all available, Tom. You can have whatever you like. There's nothing.
Yeah, sure. No,
nothing secret.
I just want to make sure that we pick up on the actions that are indicated. That's all. You know, as far as governors, sort of from our governor point of view.
Yeah, from governor point of view, but it's an executive and board matter to actually do
absolutely.
It,
we want to, we want to follow. Make sure we make sure that we follow it and get stuff presented. Yeah, that's
okay. Of course. Okay, so is that right? Any other hands? Sorry, I missed you, Tom, but I'm looking at two screens at the moment. So crisis resolution home treatment team, Darren, are you here? It looks as though you're here, Darren.
I am here, yes.
Okay, so over to you.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Darren Bailey, and I manage the crisis team across the west of Berkshire. I've just put my presentation up. Can you see that? Can you let me know if you can see that?
Yeah, we can see it, but can you put it onto sort of full screen or wherever it is, or presentation mode? Just it's
how's that?
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, the only thing is, Martin, I can't see if anybody's got their hand up. So
I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So yes, my name's Darren Bailey. I manage the crisis team across the west of Berkshire. It's really kind of you to invite me to your meeting to talk about how we use patient feedback from I Want Great Care to try and improve the service. So I've got a few examples, but generally we put the feedback, the IWGC link feedback, on all of our discharge summaries. It's spoken about in all of our daily status exchanges and our Monday and Friday status exchange. For those of you who aren't aware, that's part of our QMIS, our quality improvement system that we use. So it's highlighted in that. We have a couple of lived experience workers in the crisis team, Marcella and Ashley. And Ashley also contacts patients and reminds them to give feedback, or helps them through that feedback process. And we've also got a screen now just outside the crisis team office. You come through the main entrance at Prospect Park. There's a screen there that patients can use to give feedback. And also in Newbury and Wokingham, which we run a hub and spoke system. So the hub is in Reading. In Newbury and Wokingham, we have tablets that patients can use to give their feedback. So the feedback that we get is emailed to every team member, so that they can see how the feedback's going, how we're getting on with the feedback. It's also presented at our ULT meeting, which again is part of the quality improvement stuff we use. And what we've found in the crisis team, the best way to kind of keep patients involved particularly within the QMIS process, because we are a pretty short-term team. People are with us on average for a couple of weeks only. Is that we collect the feedback, and then we take themes from that feedback and raise a ticket for them via the QMIS process in our huddle, and then we'll use that ticket to work on using the QI methodology to figure out how we can do that. So what I've got here now is a few examples of tickets that we've raised on behalf of patients, from the patient feedback directly from I Want Great Care, and what we've done about it. So one of the tickets we had was not always ensuring we use a person-centered approach, responding to individual difficulties. So for instance, ASD was one of the areas that came up, and adapting our treatment to meet patient needs. So of course we like to think that we're very patient-centered, and we do try our best to be patient-centered, but we're a 24/7 team, so consistency has always been an issue with the crisis team. And we have to prioritize. So we did some training with all the staff on ASD, what it means to people, and how we can use, once we know they've got ASD, what kinds of stuff they find difficult to cope with and what kind of stuff works. We did a lot of thinking around, it's very difficult for us to give an exact appointment time. Of course, people with ASD like everything quite precise. So we did some work around that, and on how we could, let the people know if we were going to be late because we had other things going on, rather than just give them a time frame of 2 hours when we were going to meet them. Marcella and Ashley, who I mentioned earlier on, both join inpatient contact, so they'll go out with members of the team, nurses, doctors, etc. And they'll sit in on the assessment or on the consultation, and they'll advocate for the patient while they're actually in that consultation, and then afterwards they'll give constructive advice and feedback to the staff member. So if there was anything that they could have done better, they'll look at that and they'll discuss that with the member of staff, and that's working really well. And the other thing we did, we had a learning event which focused on patient care and the importance of making every contact count. So the next one was around patients having to repeat themselves multiple times, particularly when giving history or the events leading up to their referrals. Again, this is quite common. It's probably not just with the crisis team, but across multiple teams. So what usually happens, somebody will come to us either from CPE or another part of the service. They will have already had to give their history and everything, and then they'll come to us and we'll have a nurse who's very conscientious. We'll ask them all the same questions again, and of course things about how many brothers and sisters you've got, your family history, and that's not really ever going to change, is it? So it was quite annoying for patients. So again, we looked at some work around that, making every contact count. We did some learning around the importance of reading the progress notes before visiting to ensure that we've got that history, so we're not going over old ground again. We did a lot of training on summarising and formulating an impression with the team, and then we did some agenda setting workshops to encourage the team really before they go out to set an agenda of what they're going to talk about during that consultation, what they need to know, and then when they get into the consultation, asking the patient and the carer if they're there, what they need to know about what they would like to know, what they would like to talk about today. And then we did some stuff because some of our questions we do have to repeat, questions around mood, mental state, risk, and things like that, and it can be quite repetitive. So we also did some work with the staff around explaining to the patients that the reason we want to establish a baseline, and when we've established that baseline, we ask the same questions again to see whether the person's improving or maybe not improving. And we devised a shorter initial assessment template to try and help with that issue as well. We looked at patients and carers gave feedback about lack of information on medication, what it's for, doses, side effects, and particularly what to do post-discharge. So in the crisis team, we didn't have a pharmacist. We do now have a pharmacist who works 2 days a week. We offer the information on the Sharing Choice and Medication website. We provide patient information leaflets now, which we weren't doing prior to this ticket being raised. We've got various physical health clinics running throughout the crisis team. And the other thing we've got is non-medical prescribers. We've got probably 5 or 6 in the crisis team now that help answer questions and concerns. And the other thing that they do is they offer like a follow-up service for patients who are discharged. So where GPs aren't perhaps very sure about the medication or not happy to prescribe medication continually, we can offer some support with that and support the GPs with that as well. And the other thing we make sure we do is ensure that the discharge summaries are clear now and that there's accurate medication plans for GPs to follow up on. And the last one was around using dead names or incorrect pronouns, misgendering, particularly with transgender patients, and this is in progress now. So we've been reminding staff constantly at huddles and in the ULTs of the importance of using the correct name, pronoun, and gender, which would seem on the surface to be a fairly easy thing to do, but actually in Rio they're often called by their original name or a different name, so it's not always very clear when we meet the patient. So we did look at adding a preferred name onto Rio, but unfortunately that's not possible at the current time. So we're now planning to insert the preferred name and gender into the weekly MDT templates. And we've also requested from the Pride Network some resources with a plan to share that with the team and improve understanding of the importance and using the correct information because of the impact that it obviously has with patients. So that's the end of my slideshow. Has anybody got any questions?
John Wellham and Tom.
Yeah. Sally and I went to actually visit your section, didn't we, earlier in the year? And I'm pleased to say, if anything, things have improved even further than when we visited you. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. That was very interesting and encouraging. I just wanted to ask about reading progress notes. I don't know what form progress notes take, but I wonder if it could be made easier in some way, or if there's other physical problems like not getting a signal or not being able to park up before you see the patient, that in actual practical problems that could make it difficult to be properly prepared.
So I think the main issue, Tom, is probably time. Sometimes we're really busy and clinicians are really rushed. They'll go out to do appointment after appointment. So it is about taking time to actually read the notes before they go out and preparing for that appointment and trying to manage their time accordingly. We have looked at that and looked at ways in which we can do that. We did have a project a few years ago that was run with the crisis team where we were issued with iPads, and the iPads provide connectivity while you're outside. It's a lot better, it's a lot easier than using a laptop. So some of our staff have still got that, so we are starting to use them more often and look at other ways where maybe technology can help as well. But it is the main issue is pressure of time. People feel so pressured, they've got to rush out, somebody needs to be seen, and they're just not putting that kind of prep work in beforehand. And the other thing is, of course, progress notes, there's reams and reams of them, and often people write very kind of Shakespearean entries which go on for a really long time. So yeah.
Well, that was really the point I was getting to, because it's not just your division. The whole trust runs on these notes, really, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a way to get to grips with them, because they're in a form which doesn't allow them to be readily absorbed when you need to in a hurry. I know it's a whole, I mean, it's a big issue, but it's the clinical practice to use this form of notes, isn't it?
Yeah, but we can start. We have started with our staff, getting them to be more concise with their note writing, so it's more bullet points, and there should be a plan that's put in the patient's notes weekly from the MDT that should be followed. So actually, there's not. It's not vast amounts information they have to get to be able, because it should be in the plan what you're going to do, and then the history. They should be able to discuss that in places like the MDT meetings and other places. So it's just about thinking ahead and being more prepared, I think. But yeah, you're right. There are other issues as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Julian.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things, really, Martin, to say that I think the services is doing incredibly well. So nationally, we benchmark as a bit of an outlier in terms of the numbers of calls that are coming through to Darren's service. So if you look at the morbidity of the area, the deprivation and stuff, we're sort of, despite actually living in a relatively affluent area with relatively low levels of morbidity across the patch, we have very high levels of demands on that service. So they're dealing with high level of demand, but not actually funded for that. So the service deal with high level demands. I think they're always making improvements. The levels of staff satisfaction, so we did some work on Darren's done some work on staff satisfaction. So if you look at them in their staff survey, the team is got really high levels of staff satisfaction, way above the upper quartile, which is quite remarkable. And last week they invite me to the carers group. So they run a bespoke carers group. And again, it's very apparent that the service listens and acts on carer feedback. Now, there's still things to do. The classic issue that carers raise is always the transition between inpatients, crisis services, CMHTs, and back to primary care, or between adults and children. But the service is, as we're going to see in terms of the kind of one team presentation, is kind of working on that, really. So I do want to commend them. I think the context in which they work is extremely challenging. And I think that they've got all the hallmarks of a great team in terms of listening, engaging, and having an improvement mentality and methodology.
Julian, thank you. And perhaps I could just add my very positive comments too from visiting Darren's team. So thank you, Darren, to you and your colleagues.
Thank you. I really appreciate
it. No, it's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions for Darren? Well, in which case, thank you, Darren. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
And you. Okay. We're now Move on, if we may, to the new operational structure, which was referred to earlier, and Tamina's going to give us a sort of think an overview, I think, of what she's doing and why. Are you there, Tamina?
I am, but it looks like my camera isn't on, so I'm going to do a sneaky thing. Just
All right.
see if I can arrange. So apologies, because I obviously can't show you who I am. That looks like it's better.
Okay.
Thank you. Apologies, everybody.
That's all right. Welcome.
Well, thank you. So good morning. I'm Tamina Majmal. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I think I can't say I'm new anymore because I've been here, I think, for just about a year. And it's been a very busy year. So I just wanted to give you an update really on the things that we've been doing around our operational arrangements over the past few months. I will just try and share. Is everyone able to see that?
Yeah. Again, are you able to put it onto full screen?
I will put it on.
Whatever is, I'm not sure what the right word is. But,
display.
Display, is it just and then I'll do the hands up.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Sure.
So when I
think you needed slideshow.
Oh yeah, slides. Yes, you've got the next slide as well.
I have. Okay. What I particularly like is how well I'm demonstrating that I'm able to operate.
It's all right. We're all keeping very quiet, Tamina.
Oh, yes. Apologies. It's not allowing me to do it. I can't.
But if it's difficult, let's
Yes.
press on anyway. Oh, there we are. You're there.
Brilliant. Okay. Excellent. So yes, when I first came into post, I inherited a situation where we had 6 divisions you'll probably be aware of. So we had 2 sets of services for community services, one organised in the east and one in the west, mirrored by our mental health community services also in the east and the west, which replicated the arrangements we had in terms of our commissioners. So we had commissioners on the east side of Berkshire and on the west side of Berkshire who commissioned separately for each of those places. We also had separately a mental health inpatients division, which runs our inpatient unit at Prospect Park, and then a separate children, families, young people learning disability division, which at that point was Berkshire wide, although to be fair, a number of the teams are organised around the 6 local authorities. So I think you agree we've got a slightly complicated landscape with 6 local authorities and the commissioners now moving into our 2 integrated care boards, Frimley and then Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West. There have been some discussions for a number of months and years, I think, about how we wanted to organise our arrangements to fit with the new system arrangements that were beginning to develop. So the teams were ready really to think about how they might want to organise themselves differently. And where we've ended up is we have a single mental health services division, which combines mental health inpatients and all of the community mental health and specialist mental health services across the whole of Berkshire. We have a community services division, which similarly has a single community inpatient arrangement and community physical health services across the whole of Berkshire. And then the children and families they're describing themselves as a children, families and all age division. So they have children's physical and mental health services. They also have learning disability services and eating disorders, which are all age services. So they wanted to reflect that they are organised around children and families, but they do offer some all age services as well. Why did I want to do this? I think over time, the division of operational services between the East and West did begin to show a difference really in terms of experiences for staff and patients. Some of that was driven by the different ways in which some of the services were commissioned, but it did mean that those services only sort of looked outwards and didn't always look inwards. It meant that sometimes services and teams were operating in isolation and a lack of resilience and mutual aid. So if one team had plenty of staffing and another was a bit short of staffing, there wasn't the culture really to share that resource to make sure that there was sufficient support across all of those teams. Over time, a lack of consistency began to develop in terms of roles and responsibilities and what we were expecting of our staff and what they could expect of us. And I suppose critically, we had some examples of really good service provision that we weren't replicating across the whole of Berkshire. So this is where we've ended up. We have a Director of Mental Health Services, Teresa Wiles, who's now responsible, as I said, for all of the community mental health and inpatient mental health services. Karen continues to lead our children, families and all age pathways. And Claire Williams is now leading our community health services across the whole of Berkshire. Each of them is supported by a service director responsible for a specific portfolio or set of services. So, for example, in mental health, we have a service director leading on mental health inpatients and the urgent care pathway, including the services that Darren was talking to you about earlier in terms of the crisis response home treatment team. And that service director, Helen Robson, is supported by a clinical director working alongside her, and jointly they're operationally and clinically responsible for that pathway, that set of services. We then have community mental health services in the broader sense of the term, so our community mental health teams, mental health integrated services, etc. And then again, separately, some of our specialist mental health services. So, for example, criminal justice liaison and diversion, our IAPT services are also included in that, and our veteran services, Op Courage. Karen's organised her services in two ways. She's pulling together CAMS and learning disability, and children, family and neurodiversity services are a separate set of services. And then in our community health services, we've organised them into community health scheduled care. So those are things like podiatry, MSK, physiotherapy, etc. And then the community health urgent care services, which includes things like our virtual wards and our community hospital beds. The aim really of that restructure is to ensure that we have much better consistency in terms of our quality and the values that we deliver through our services, the experience of our patients and our staff, and the outcomes our patients experience. We really wanted to develop much more clarity and simplicity about who's responsible for what, where people need to go if there are any concerns or issues, and how they get support. I think it's important to organise our services around pathways rather than simply geography, although through the restructure we recognise that our relationships with our local authorities, our local primary care teams and our local acute trusts are extremely important and will still be front and foremost in terms of how we deliver care locally. We really wanted to build some resilience and also build for the future in terms of how our services develop. And I suppose, as I said, for me, making sure that we deliver the best of everywhere, everywhere. I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Right, Tamina, John Wellham has got his hand up.
Yes, it's a difficult question, I suspect, but we've got the ICSs who are starting to make a role for themselves, and it's not an easy task taking all the different members of the ICS and getting them working in the one direction, which I would say was for the patient benefit. And any thoughts on that?
That's quite I mean, it's a very full conversation. It might be that Julian might want to come in as well. I think one of the things is that the new arrangements do is give us an opportunity to lead the way. We are an excellent provider. We have an excellent reputation. We know that we deliver very strong, highly reputed mental health and community and children's services. And I guess one of the things we're trying to do is influence the direction and the ambitions of each of the ICSs in terms of how we develop and deliver our services. One of the things I wanted to do through these arrangements is to release our clinical and operational leads to be able to spend time in those programs of work where they're really developing what the services will look like in the future. So we've got a really strong clinical voice, but also operationally being able to reflect what's possible and what we think we should be doing in terms of the patient needs. I guess the other thing for us really to develop is how we properly engage with our broadest stakeholders. So not just people we work alongside, but our partners in terms of our patients and their families, who are really giving us a strong steer in terms of where our services should be developing going forward. But Julian, you might want to come in.
By the way,
Yeah,
Tamina, could just
interrupt.
unshare your
Tazeen,
screen.
I think you should turn off your screen share because we can see
I'm
your
so sorry. All of my emails.
Well, I didn't realise Tamina thought that about me in her emails, but there you go. all is revealed. I think it's a really good question. I'm going to be really honest with you, John. Is that you're right. The health and social care system has never been more complicated. Department of Health, NHS England, regions, ICBs, ICS, health and wellbeing boards, provider trust with Council of Governors. You know, you're right. Alignment is key to the delivery of high quality, sustainable health and social care. And so getting all that together is a task. Now, it's not our responsibility alone, but we can play a part in that. So one of the things that we've been doing as a long-standing organisation is working and contributing to ICB development and ICS development around helping, I guess, sort out what their priorities are, because they can't do everything. And that's the kind of key role that we play is, you know, what is it that they can uniquely do and only do at system level that we all need to contribute to. And again, I'll be equally honest, it's work in progress because they are quite immature sort of beings. They've got a lot of requests on their time and everything else, but I think it is a key question, and I'd say it's something we're attending to, but it's very much work in progress.
All right, is that all right, John? I shared Julian's analysis, by the way. Any other questions? Okay, well, Tamina, thank you very much. The board very much supports your direction of travel on this. So, and we look forward to its maturity in time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Right. The next one is the external well-led review. So I'll say a few words about it, and then happy to take questions. Boards are expected, good practice, to have an external review every few years so they can understand what they're doing well, what they're doing less well, where there are opportunities they could concentrate on more, etc. And we engaged DCO, who are consultants who do this for lots of organisations, to review our board. And you'll see from the report they talk to a whole range of people, obviously our board members themselves, but also external stakeholders, ICS chairs, etc., to try and get a feel for, you know, how we're doing in terms of the governance aspect. You'll see it's a very favourable and positive report, which is always welcome. But the things that we want to know is how we can continue to improve and get things better. So it made some recommendations, some conclusions about the board, which we discussed, and also some recommendations about the. I can just find my text about the board, which you might like to consider. And yesterday we had a board session, a sort of private discursive session. And one of the items was we looked at this report, its final form, because it's been through a bit of iteration, and we looked at the conclusions and the recommendations. And the recommendations of the board, some of which we supported, some we weren't quite sure about, but they will be in the minutes of the meeting, so you will see those. It's just that they're only done yesterday, and we haven't had a chance to get them typed up and sent out. But I'm happy to answer questions on those as you wish. But there were two conclusions in particular which relate to governors, and if I can refer you to page 76, and item D was one of their, in the conclusions. It said the Council of Governors are supportive but feel disempowered in terms of their public role and in terms of building stronger relationships with non-executive directors. Physical engagement has not recovered from COVID. So I'm going to put this on the table and say there's no need to panic to think of what you want to say, but if you've got comments about this, I'll be very pleased to hear, either now or in due course, so we can make sure we respond as appropriate. Tom O'Kane has got his hand up.
Sorry, yeah. My comment was about something that's missing from the report.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, but I'm dipping in and out of this meeting, as Julie knows. It surprised me that the question about research in the trust wasn't either answered by the people, the interviewers, nor brought up by any of the members that were interviewed. I think research is very important. I think it's good for the staff to be involved in research because it promotes their careers. It means that usually we're employ a higher grade of staff. So I just want to make the point that I was disappointed that research didn't figure.
Yeah, Tom, I think remember, this is a report about the effectiveness of our governance. So basically the effectiveness of the board, and the board does take papers on research, as you know, you see the papers. So it's not about the trust as a whole, it's about the board itself, and are we doing a good job in terms of governance?
I recognize that, but other subjects did come up. So I would, well, okay, I'll let me just make the point. I think research is important and the trust should be involved in it. And Julian's going to say something. Thank you.
We agree. Guy, could you just hang on while Julian just responds?
Yes. So I don't know if it's included by the background. It is in the report, actually. So there is a NHS improvement, NHS England template around well-led that covers all parts of the body, which the trust board completed several times. And it does include things like the research environment. After completing the self-assessment, Tom, we asked the specialist company, rather than just to tell us what we already knew and we'd already audited, we asked them to probe some areas beyond that to check. I think that was it, wasn't it, Martin?
That's correct.
We asked them for quite a specific, don't just tell us what we already know, and we gave them our self-assessment and the evidence against it. So that was why some things appear and don't, and I think that's probably helpful context for you now, Tom, and may make a bit more sense, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. That I understand. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julian. Guy.
Yeah, thank you. On page 76, for what it's worth, by the way, what you were saying about that Council of Governors paragraph D, I disagree with it, because I think that what Julian and Jenny does for us with the breakout rooms does allow us to keep strong relations with the non-execs, and I find them all very attentive. Thank you. But the point I was going to make was paragraph J says that the organisation is data heavy, and I'm wondering whether their comments there will have any impact on the information we receive as governors in future.
Well, I think it was really in terms of the board packs, which are quite lengthy, and we've had a discussion about this, and there is always a balance to be struck. If you have all the information available, board members quite rightly complain that the big issues are being lost in the detail. They spend all weekend reading all the papers when they don't perhaps need to. If you do it too briefly and not very effectively, board members say, hang on, there's things here missing. We think we're being not being told the truth, as it were. And so there's a sort of learning curve. So we'll be going through that. We haven't really started yet, but we'll be going through that to try and get the papers as succinct as possible, but still contain the core information we need at board. In terms of your own papers, we'll try and do something similar, because some of these papers you receive anyway are board papers, and we'd always welcome any views you have about how we can do that. So I don't know if that helps, Guy. But
thank you.
Okay. I think Brian next, and then Tom Lake.
Yes, just a quick question. You mentioned, Martin, you had a discursive board meeting yesterday on this report. Could you just cover the timeline that we can expect to see proposed actions out of this report?
Right. Well, Julie we had a discussion. Julie is going to produce the minutes of that discussion, which you'll see. So you'll see a plan as to what we're going to do. I have to say, if you look at the recommendations 1 to 5 on page 77, there is very little of urgency. There's nothing sort of broken. It's more about things we want to consider to continue to improve. I'm happy just to briefly go through them. So, for example, if I look at strategy development, the report, unfortunately, in the study was done midway through our strategy process. So they didn't get a full picture of the strategy process. And so some of this stuff about aspirations to for the trust to have concrete plans, etc. Well, they weren't done when they were doing the paper, so they only saw it partway through. But we are going to do that, and we were discussing it yesterday. There's bits about item 2 about board development, and we went through these. Some we thought we liked and we wanted to do. So, for example, in terms of getting more information about the ICSs and indeed local authorities in the voluntary sector, so educational things for the board, we're very supportive of. Innovation in the digital area, where we are keen on that, as you know, and there are plans again that weren't necessarily visible to the consultants, but we want to have more emphasis on that and see our progress on our digital strategy more frequently at the board. The fourth one is called about governors, how best to support governors, the issue I've just raised, and this is where we very much want to hear the governors' views and suggestions, because we want to get it right. And then the shadow board, the last one, about establishing a shadow board to promote diversity, get new people coming up for senior leadership positions. We had a long discussion about this, and we are very supportive, not of a shadow board, but of a group of up-and-coming members of staff to consider a particular topic, which is a topic that the board is considering, a strategic topic, something of real meat, and to get them to study that properly over some time, and then make their recommendations back to us. So rather than inviting them to read all the board papers we have to read, is actually find a substantial topic, which is a board level topic, which they can work on. So they're learning about how to do things at a strategic level. They're learning also what the board's trying to do, and what do we do when we lock ourselves away in a room. And also it's helping their career by encouraging them to want to go further in their career. So we're actually quite keen on that, and we just need to work out how to do that as a practical thing. But these will be down in the plan that we discussed, and I just don't have it because it was only yesterday, but Julie will be, as normal, reporting that to you. Is that all right, Brian?
Yeah, no, that's very comprehensive. Thank you.
Any other? Tom Lake.
Firstly, congratulations on such a favourable report. We have a very favourable opinion, I'm sure you know, but it's really excellent. And then just to say a second thing, that there's one of the themes is that it's not clear where decisions are taken. And clearly, decisions can't be taken strategy papers can't be written in the board. But perhaps it would be, I think, as an observer, just to say sometimes there might be choices that haven't been exposed, or what the choices were, or a little bit of history of the decisions might be a bit more exposed in the papers. That's all. And the third thing is to say about this support for the governor public role. I think part of the difficulty has been that it's always been tied in with Marcom's strategy. And really, this means that it sort of gets wrapped up with what Marcoms are doing about public relations and support for services. And I think this is a problem. And if I'm just speaking as a past chair of the MP group, perhaps if it were taken separately, it might be possible to do something. It would be a bit easier. It wouldn't get tangled up in these other things. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, Tom. I think we sort of faced up to this, haven't we, over several years, and it always gets quite difficult. I put the Marcoms to one side. It's more about, I think, what we as governors, you as governors and me as chair governor, want to actually achieve as the end point, and then we can work out how best to deliver it. And I think it is difficult. I noticed that the acute hospitals, which traditionally have, their famous orthopedic surgeon or something, will come and talk to a public meeting, and all the people with bad hips and bad knees go along to listen to it, etc. But now it's done online. Friendly does all theirs online, I think, now. So it's a question of how we, what is the right way of getting to members, getting to the public, and it is quite tricky, I think, to find something. So I think if we can concentrate on what we want to achieve as that, and then we can work out, and if it's a Marcoms issue, we can address that. I'm just not quite sure. I've got a feeling as to what the end result, what success would look like, if you know what I mean. But I think we need to discuss it. We need to make sure we're happy, whatever it is. Is that okay? Any other comments on the paper? You've got someone else? No, it's Tom. Okay. In which case, this will be going to the public board meeting with the plan, so it'll be in the public domain, and we look forward to being challenged to make sure we continue to deliver on what it is we said we were going to do. But it is an important process in board governance to have this external review. Okay. Committee steering group reports. I think I'll just hand it living life to the full.
So just say we had a really interesting presentation, which from Martin Gill, service lead at Reading Community Mental Health Teams. And when you look at it, you see that it does present a lot of the issues of alignment that were mentioned earlier, and emphasizes how much personal relationships are important in making sure that the processes are working across the boundaries of the trust, between the trust and other agencies. I thought that was really interesting, and we had quite a good discussion as well. So I invite the governors to come to our next meeting, which would probably be, I'm trying to arrange some charities to tell us what it's like working alongside the trust. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Membership and public engagement.
Yep, just one comment to highlight. I was very conscious at our last meeting that the direction of thinking and the suggestions made in a whole number of M&PE meetings are now bearing fruit in the strategy and delivery by Marcoms. And I'd like to just chalk up a shout out to Marcoms that they're very much applying their expertise to the way the committee is wanting to see things develop. So thank you, Marcoms.
Thank you for that, Brian. Okay, any questions for three chairs? Right, executive reports on the trust, item 12, Julian. Any questions for Julian? Tom, is that your hand up again, or was that no? Guy.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the performance report, a couple of points. Page 91, staff assaults, what I usually bang on about. I know we're kindly going to see if somebody could come along to talk to us to reassure us that maybe the reality isn't quite as bad as it looks there. And my other point was going to be on page 98, something I hadn't really picked up on before, is the talking therapy treatment and recovery target of 50%. It just seems quite low. I'm just wondering whether we should maybe be striving for higher than that.
Julian.
Yeah, thanks. Two really good questions, actually, Martin. On the staff assaults, Martin and Julie, very happy we could get someone to come and talk about that. We have a lead for it, and sort of get under the skin of the work we're doing. I think it is quite bad, actually, Guy. I mean, to come to work and get belted or physically abused or whatever is just awful. It takes the joy out of work, and we've obviously got a number of places where the incidences of violence and aggression are wholly unacceptable. The majority of it happens in acute psychiatry, so the adult inpatient wards, our organic ward for older people, particularly where we have dementia, where people don't often have capacity and are actually committing assaults without sort of capacity, and our learning disability unit, where we're taking people who are known to have extreme behavioural disturbance. So that's the sort of context in which 95% of the assaults take place. So it is a challenge to get it right, but as a board, we believe we can do more all of the time, even when you get a challenge of saying, we're now going to admit someone with a history of extreme violence. We think it's our job to be able to intervene and do some different. Otherwise, why we're providing the space? And we believe we have a duty to support our staff with all the knowledge and therapeutic interventions to try and reduce that risk. And when you see the presentation, you'll see that we're doing just that. Just bear with me this 1 second. Yeah, so where was I? Yeah, so we can present on that. One of the things, because we made it a priority, Guy, is unlike other trusts, we count every single bit of contact. So if a person's hit several times during the course of the day by the same member, by patient, often it's counted as once nationally, but we count every one of those. So it does. So we're absolutely very transparent about it. The second question was about talking therapies. Then that is a national target based on international evidence about what you might expect a high-performing service to be able to achieve, and the bar is quite high in terms of recovery, in terms of what's required. So it's not us; it's an international standard, if you like. So I'm content to leave it like that, because that's that's an evidence-based approach to it.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Yes, I noticed from the report that the staff turnover percentage has gone down rather well, and the agency usage percentage is down. And leaving aside good fortune, I was wondering if you could comment on the practical steps the trust has taken to influence those figures, because they seem to have gone down more this time than before, or not gone up. It seems like a pleasing trend, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so, but Brian, if I'm honest with you, Brian, it's too early to say that, I think. So obviously, we've got to look at the longer term trend there, but I have an aspect. So can I put it in some strategic context? I have a personal objective now, which Martin has signed off, to get the turnover by March 2025 to 12%. Now, we've previously had that, and if I can explain the thinking behind that, please, Brian, is that we're actually quite good at recruiting people, because we've got a good reputation, people will come and work here, but there are lots of opportunities. So if we carry on at our current recruitment trajectory and move from effectively 16% to a 12% turnover, the existential issue of workforce shortages that we've got will be significantly reduced. And so this is a major area of focus for us. And yes, we've got an array of things going on. The quality of our exit interviews and the follow-up, we're using independent sort of contractor to do quite a lot of work about understanding people's motive for leaving. We're doing quite a lot of work around the first 12 months and induction, because actually quite a lot of the turnovers very early on in people's careers. Once this at Berkshire Healthcare longer than that, they tend to sort of move on. So I think that's one element. I do think, Brian, the other thing that I'm quite hopeful of is the pay resolution. So the nurses have got a backdated pay of a couple of £1,000 one-off payment coming in 7-8 days time, plus a 5% pay increase. And I think with the general election looming not long away, I think we'll see another pay award of a similar magnitude next year. And of course, this isn't all about pay and conditions, but for the first time, you look at our staff survey, people are very happy to work here, but they are very unhappy about their pay and remuneration, which is quite unusual. You know, that's an unusual trend. So if we fix that as well, I think that will also help, because the cost of living has really hit us hard, particularly in support worker roles, administrative roles, and things like that, where people can get paid more. So 12% by March 2025. So something to be very clearly held to account for. And we're going to give it a damn good go.
Right, we'll monitor that and work with you.
Thanks, Brian.
So will I, Brian. No, it's a really important metric, and because so many things spill out of that issue, and I'm very pleased that we're going to be really focusing on that. Graham.
Yeah, I was looking at the KPI on page 98, out of area placements, occupied bed days west. By the way, a comment that we're still referring to CCGs nearly a year after they were disestablished, I suppose is the best way to describe. Over double the target. Now, there's a reference there to revised target of 2022-23, so I'm not entirely clear whether this is the revised target or there has been a revised target. So maybe just a comment on that and how that relates to targets in the past and what the trend here is. But obviously that looks quite concerning, and I just wanted to understand where that's arising. Is that an issue for BHFT because BHFT don't have the resources, or is that external resources we can't place into? Just a commentary on that, please.
Yeah, I can do the latter, Graham. I don't think it's very clear. So, Julie, if we could just in future we just clarify the narrative around that. We're only a year behind, as Graham says, with the change in sort of commissioner, but pick that up. In relation to sort of bed pressures, the strategic piece of work we've just done, Graham, is to do a bed modelling exercise to look at the needs of the Berkshire population that we serve, and to work out whether we've got the right number of beds. Not whether we think we've got the right number of beds, but health planning, from a health planning perspective. Now, nationally and internationally, we have a very low bed base in the UK, and within that, Berkshire Healthcare has an extremely low bed base. And we think, in terms of having the right size wards, we think our 4 wards are a bit too big. And looking at population growth, we're about a ward short. So we think we're about 18 beds short, of which about half of those are made up of we're about 9 beds short in terms of what we need internally. So we need to improve that. And then the further 9 beds is about right sizing the size of our wards, which also have an impact on flow and therapeutic. They can actually have a smaller ward, tend to have a shorter length of stay. So I think that's a more helpful answer, which is part of the out of area placements we're operating in is not because of sort of inefficiency or anything else. It's actually a genuinely unmet need, which we're now attending to and working with both ICBs. So we're presenting that findings from the independent review of our bed base, and working potentially with other trusts like Oxford Health and Surrey and Borders to attend to that. So in the absence of that, what we're using is external private beds to kind of make up for that. That is predicated, Graham, on a couple of things. One is effective and efficient community services, and we heard a presentation today on part of that in terms of the crisis services. And secondly is good flow, and that is about your internal processes in the hospital, but it's also on about partner organisations as well, in terms of housing, accommodation, social care, all that type of stuff, which is also having an impact. And that's kind of the system work we need to work on too. But assuming we've got a reasonable model around all of that, we're 9 beds short, and a further 9 to get the wards at Prospect Park right sized. Is that helpful context behind those numbers?
It is. I think, if we can develop that, and certainly, obviously, the word integrated in the integrated care system, that idea that we are all working from a similar hymn sheet, in order to solve an issue within the system rather than within a particular trust, seems to me to be, the proof will be in the eating as things continue to develop at sort of system level.
Yeah, I agree, Graham. I'm going to be really fascinated when we present the detail objectively of where we're at, the bed usage and all the rest of it, or whether the integrated care system sort of, the ownership that we get in terms of that, or we're left to fend for ourselves. It was a classic acid test. So, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? So I agree with you.
Dominic.
Yeah, I noticed this too. And just to follow up there, Julian, can you explain why it's all in the West? Is it just that population has increased?
Or what's in the West, sorry?
Well, really, all the excess days are in the West, out of area placement days.
Yeah, it's not, no. So over a longer period of time, the issue it can spike in particular areas, but actually over the course of, let's take a 2-year look at it, it's a East and West issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much then, Julian.
Thank you.
Now we just get on towards the closing part of this meeting. We'll take perhaps 13 and 14 governor feedback and any other business perhaps together, so we can just governors can raise whatever they would like. Anything people want to raise? Okay, I just got one thing which I'd just like formally raise, which is Mahmood Amiam, our long-serving non-executive director, is stepping down, of course, and we'll be discussing her replacement later. But I just want to record, I'm sure I want to record your thanks for 8 years of service to the Trust. Mahmuda has been a very wise and very compassionate NED. She has a real commitment to the care of more disadvantaged patients, and I found it really, really inspiring to have her alongside. So if you're agreeable, we'll record something in the minutes to thank her for her service. Thank you for that. John Wellham, sorry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. I went to the National Providers Conference. I'm still waiting for their official minutes from that. Because I went down with a cold from the visit, there was nothing vital that I think I want to share with you from my memory. But as soon as I get the papers from that, then I will make them available. I also went to a meeting of lead governors and deputy lead governors, so with Sim for Bob, and I will be getting papers from that, and I will be obviously making those available to my fellow governors.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Brian.
Yes, just a quick passing reference I mentioned in the informal meeting before. It was Bracknell Pride on Saturday, and I went and spent an hour and a half in the marquee there and met some of our people from across the Trust, a couple of people from the Frimley Health ICB, and our own from Upton Park, our own sexual health team were represented there. So I got to meet some new people. It was a very, very well run event, I have to say.
Thank you, Brian. I've seen the pictures on our website. It looks very good.
Yes.
Okay. Which case, move on to close the meeting. Dates the next meeting, 19th of July for the joint NEDs and Council of Governors, which will be a hybrid meeting, face-to-face at London House, and then 27th September, the formal council meeting, followed by the annual members meeting. So with that, we'll consider the resolution to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting, as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be conducted. So if those of you who are not governors, apart from Julie and myself, I think, could leave.